Welcome to London's Imperial War Museum, where the air is thick with anticipation as we await the unveiling of a new work by Landscape Artist of the Year, Jen Gash.
Commissioned by this prestigious institution to produce a work to commemorate the 1918 Armistice, Jen has spent the last 6 weeks immersed in First World War history.
And tonight, before an invited audience of historians, curators, and our own esteemed judges, the fruits of her labour will be seen in public for the very first time.
In this year's competition, we challenged talented artists across Britain to paint some of the country's breathtaking landscapes.
The prize was a £10,000 commission from one of our most important national museums.
The prize this year is phenomenal. It's a life-changing moment. The artist is going to get their painting into the Imperial War Museum.
After 6 heats, with 48 artists competing, there could be only one winner.
The Landscape Artist of the Year is Jen Gash.
Some days I wake up and I think, did I dream all of that?
But winning the competition was only the beginning.
Why am I an attractor,
Why are you
Alan?
an attractor? Well, it's the easiest way to get up here.
Jen's commission will take her to a forgotten battlefield in Macedonia.
Those young men that arrived at the port and never returned, and their families didn't even know where they went.
Pushing her artistic talents to the limit,
It's not the view that's in front of me I'm painting, it's the pasts of all the people, all the stuff that's gone on.
the painting must bring history to life.
I get the feeling he was probably a bit of a ladies' man.
Nobody can swear like a British soldier.
And along the way, she'll be forced to confront some battles of her own.
It's quite a tough journey. This had a bit of a cry this morning. It's all big stuff, really.
When she returns home, Jen must create a painting worthy of its place in the Imperial War Museum's world-famous collection
We are actually in a cowshed.
and unveil the finished work to the public.
I'm worried about everyone hating it.
And the moment has come. OK, here we go. It's 3 weeks since the final of Sky Art's Landscape Artist of the Year, and winning artist Jen Gash has come to Imperial War Museum North in Manchester to find out about the landscape she's being commissioned to paint.
Since the final, it's been strange. It feels like I'm in this sort of alternative reality. Some days I wake up and I think, did I dream all of that? And some days I wake up and think, no, it did definitely happen. And then I've just been really excited and nervous about what's going to happen next.
Jen is a part-time artist from Bristol and also works as an occupational therapist. It was her haunting view of a ghostly roller coaster that secured her place in this year's competition. She won her heat in Broadstairs with an evocative vision of a decaying seaside town.
And the artist that the judges have selected is Jen Gash.
I like the way she gets so close to being abstract, and her scene is brimming with life. It feels like the stuff underneath my feet. It feels like sand. That's where her life came in.
In the semi-final, Jen met the complex view of Felixstowe Docks head-on. The second artist to reach the final is Jen Gash.
I think she paints in a very poetic way. It's not just about storytelling. There's a lot of room in her painting for contemplation and interpretation.
Down to the last 3 artists, Jen was set a 2-week challenge to paint Brighton Pier, followed by an intense 4.5-hour final in Greenwich Park. In the end, the timeless quality and emotional power of her paintings won her the title of Landscape Artist of the Year 2018.
Jen has something else. It's something unquantifiable. It moves us in a way that we didn't know we could be moved, and it's opening up a whole new way of seeing the world. And that is kind of quite remarkable for an artist to be able to do that.
Now Jen faces her toughest challenge yet, her commission from the Imperial War Museum. The work will join the museum's existing First World War paintings, which include some of the most important works of 20th century art.
The 1919 exhibition
phenomenal. Gosh.
She's being shown around the collection by the museum's head of art, Becky Newell.
So this is Gash by John Singer Sargent. It's probably the most well-known painting from the war art schemes. Artists played an absolutely vital role in recording what happened in the war and what the war meant to anyone. And that's hugely important. And for some people, that's the predominant way of learning about the past.
Jen's painting will be a contemporary addition to these historic works to mark the centenary of the 1918 Armistice.
This is the great moment I get to tell you all about your commission from us here at IWM. So we've got some really amazing paintings in the collection, but there's a predominant focus on the French and Belgian battlefields. And of course, that isn't the only thing that was going on in the First World War. So what I'd like you to do is the Salonica campaign.
Okay.
One of the key moments in that campaign was the Battle of Costarino Ridge in what is now Macedonia. So visit that landscape, think in terms of your 21st century eyes, how you think about that today, and what it can tell us about commemoration 100 years on.
Gosh, that's quite an amazing thing. Thank you so much. I'm sort of just wanting to scribble notes. I've got so many questions burning away.
The First World War Battle of Costarino was fought between British and Bulgarian forces. It was one of the first battles of the Salonica campaign, named after the port where the troops first landed. The campaign received very little coverage during the war, and only 2 British artists served there. One was the famous modernist painter Sir Stanley Spencer.
So this is Stanley Spencer's Travois arriving at Smol, and it's one of the only paintings we've got really that depict the Salonica front. And this is 1916 at that point.
Okay.
And his job as a medical orderly was to transfer wounded men from stretchers to travois, which were these mule-drawn carts, essentially.
And the figures were, literally placing their hands in a healing, kind of calming way. It's just beautiful, isn't it? Seeing the art here and the enormity and the size, literally the scale and how great the works are, I'm kind of going, oh! But I'm very excited as well. And I'm really looking forward to finding those elements in the landscape that can tell the story that needs to be told.
Jen will soon be on her way to Macedonia. But to help her understand what it was like to be an artist at war 100 years ago, Becky Newell has suggested she learns more about Sir Stanley Spencer, who served in the Salonica campaign. Jen's come to Sandham near Newbury to meet the artist's daughter, Shireen, and grandson, John.
Spencer served in Salonica from September 1916 until the end of the war, first as a medical orderly and then in the infantry. When he returned, he went on to become one of the most famous and well-loved British artists of his day. In the 1920s, he was commissioned to paint the interior of this memorial chapel.
Come in.
This was Spencer's answer to the Sistine Chapel.
The paintings show the troops in Salonica not in battle, but going about their daily life at the front.
That must be a bowl of soup. Oh, there they've got a wonderful bowl of soup. And over here, they're making breakfast.
Right.
Frying bacon.
At the end of the chapel, behind the altar, is a Spencer masterpiece, The Resurrection.
Well, this is, to me, beyond anything, really. I know I saw it a lot as a child, but the way the crosses, they lead up to a figure. The little figure in white is Christ.
Spencer had been captivated by the dramatic beauty of the Macedonian landscape, but he was also profoundly affected by the traumatic events that took place there.
Shireen, how do you think these experiences changed Stanley's art when he came back?
Well, the whole experience of the war had been damaging. And you look at all these pictures of the young men. That was a big betrayal.
We have a letter
Oh, gosh.
that Stanley wrote on the 20th of July 1917 to his friend Henry Lamb.
I defy the blight and bloody, empty, gutless opaqueness that would possess me. I am 1,000 times more determined to do something 1,000 times greater than anything I have done before when I get home, and I'm storing up energy all the time.
That's amazing.
When Spencer came home in 1918, he struggled to readjust to a transformed Britain. But soon he was to become prolific, drawing on his experiences to create some of the most important British artworks painted in the aftermath of the First World War.
I feel very responsible right now from a number of fronts. One, that to commemorate this battle, but also the lives lost that have not been recorded in any particular way for those families over the years. I just wanted to ask Shireen so many questions, and I could have listened to her talk for hours and hours. I had to fight off tears when she was talking. It's not just about family, it's about all the things that Stanley felt were important, big issues of humanity. It'd be interesting to see whether there are some things in the landscape that can capture that soft rhythm of daily life, but also a deep questioning of life. And so hopefully that finds its way into the work somehow.
Back home in Bristol, Jen is packing for her trip to Macedonia.
We've got 6 small canvases. Clearly, I don't plan to sleep at all.
She will be flying to the port city of Thessaloniki in northern Greece, formerly Salonica. From there, she'll head over the border into Macedonia, and the site she'll be painting for her Imperial War Museum commission, the battlefield of Costarino.
Meanwhile, Jen's husband Jeff and 2 daughters, Gilly and Janie, are preparing for a week without Mum.
It's just so surreal. I always had the feeling that she would win. So, yeah, and when she goes away, I won't struggle as such, but my dad can't cook. So that's the only thing that I'm going to really struggle with. But I'm just going to be so excited to, like, get texts from her with, like, pictures and stuff. So, yeah.
Jenny, don't put the cat on the... People are going to think we're vile because we're letting the cat on this... Honestly.
No, Jamie. No, she's fine. She's always on the kitchen worktop. Yeah. That's normal.
Yes, but...
What are you going to cook while I'm away?
Yeah, probably pizza.
Apprehensive. That's a gentle word for the level of fear I have inside of me.
I've got about a month to produce the work before it's unveiled at the Imperial War Museum, and 1 month is actually quite a short period of time. So I kind of have to really get that in perspective a little and think, what can I achieve in a month rather than bite off more than I can chew.
The responsibility is firmly dawning on me.
It's a month since the final of Sky Arts Landscape Artist of the Year, and winning artist Jen Gash has arrived in the Greek city of Thessaloniki.
Everything's becoming very real now.
Thessaloniki, which used to be called Salonica, was a highly strategic location in the First World War Balkans campaign.
The campaign began in 1915, when Britain's ally Serbia had been occupied by neighbouring Bulgaria. The aim was to push the Bulgarians back from where they were entrenched in the mountains on the Greek-Serbian border. Between 1915 and 1918, 200,000 British soldiers landed here before travelling north to the front line.
In a few days, Jen will be heading to the site of the battlefield she's been commissioned to paint by the Imperial War Museum. But first, she's come to meet one of the museum's curators, Alan Wakefield, who's an expert on the Salonica campaign.
This is the main harbour of Thessaloniki, or Salonica as it was in the First World War. And this was named English Quay because this is where all the British troops were actually going to landed during the campaign. It's a very, very sort of alien environment to most of these guys. You've got to think that most of them wouldn't have travelled potentially very extensively within the UK, let alone abroad. Actually, Jen, I've actually got a really nice quote here from a Welsh soldier who was here from 1916, Ivor Morgan.
Okay.
I don't know if you'd like to read that.
Okay. So, arriving in the harbour, one was met by a vision of a city. Absolutely Arabian Nights come to life. The blue of the Mediterranean and the fleecy clouds made it a picture unsurpassable. However, all this enchanting place was destroyed utterly when once we set foot on the ground and marched from the dock to the base camp. For the place absolutely stank, and if there were a stronger word, I would use it. Gosh, that was a shock, wasn't it?
That is pretty typical. I mean, out at sea, it looks absolutely wonderful. And when you get here, it's absolutely just chaos.
Much of the city may have changed from the chaotic scene that met the British troops when they arrived here in 1915, but some features still remain. On the hill above Thessaloniki are the city's old Byzantine walls. And it's here that Jen will paint the first of a series of preparatory studies for her final commission.
There's an incredible view, so much so I'm trying to ignore the view in some ways and just focus on the this sweep down here with the steps, because the view itself is just awe-inspiring. In my mind's eye, when I think of the young men arriving, I think of my eldest and her boyfriend that are 18, and how very close in age they would have been to the youngest men arriving, and how vulnerable they must have been, how young, how scared. And maybe life prepared them for different things back then. That's all I can kind of hope, really. My great uncle, he died in northern France in his very early 20s. It's just a hideous thought to, that loss of life. From a humanitarian point of view, in terms of the capturing that part of it in a painting, I think it's going to be very hard. Land recovers regardless of what us human beings do. We leave scars, but the land somehow recovers. Those young men that arrived at the port and never returned, and their families didn't even know where they went. It's really difficult to contemplate that.
It's day 2 of her trip and time for Jen to leave Thessaloniki and travel north towards the border with present-day Macedonia and the First World War front line.
When the soldiers arrived, it would have been quite shocking, and once they'd got over the initial shock of the port, to see the mountains rising out of the lowlands, and they look, visually to me as an artist, they look stunning, but to come here knowing that you're fighting and not knowing what to expect, they must have been terrified. And one of the things that is perplexing me really is this paradox between the beauty of the landscape and what happened here. I've thought about it lots of times over the years about paintings. I feel they have to have some aesthetic going on because otherwise people won't look at them, and if they don't look at them and somehow be attracted to them, then they don't learn from what the painting is trying to say. So it's this way of producing something of beauty in some ways, but that has the meaning that may be very ugly.
Lake Doiran, on the border between Greece and present-day Macedonia, was on the front line in the Salonica campaign. Up above the lake now stands a memorial to the men who fell in battle along its shores.
Between October 1915 and November 1918, thousands of British soldiers died on the Salonica front, and thousands more suffered from disease, mainly malaria, dysentery, and frostbite. But the troops who fought here received little recognition during the war and have largely been forgotten by the history books. Few people knew or understood what was going on here, and the British Salonica force were even referred to disparagingly as the gardeners of Salonica.
100 years since the Allied troops finally left this region, Jen's come to the memorial with the Salonica Campaign Society, many of whom have family members who lost their lives here.
I'm here because of my grandfather, who was called Horace. I never met him. He died almost 20 years before I was born, and I found his CV at home, and from that I realised that he'd been to Gallipoli and then came on to Salonica afterwards. Oh, okay. He took some pictures while he was in World War I, and there's a lot of pictures of nurses, actually. So I get the feeling he was probably a bit of a ladies' man.
I'm here really with my wife, because her great-uncle Jim was in the Royal Field Artillery, and it was a family wish that someone would be able to come over here and pay their respects to here.
Oh, okay.
That's Jim. Jim, to me, looks determined.
Yes.
He's sitting there, determined.
How about you, Bill?
My father was a company commander. That one was my father. I'm pretty sure at the beginning of the war. He looks like a fairly young man. He was 21 when the war broke out.
Okay.
He was seriously wounded.
Yeah.
Shot twice. And against all the odds survived. So I wanted to really come out here. It's almost a sort of pilgrimage in a way. Yeah. It's very easy not to sort of appreciate the enormity of what they did, really. I do remember him saying one thing that tickled me slightly at the time, was that he advised his soldiers that if any of them ever got lost, if they would swear, it would save them being shot, because he said nobody can swear like a British soldier.
The members of the Salonica Campaign Society have travelled hundreds of miles to this remote region to see for themselves the place where their relatives fought and died. But the mood is far from sombre. For Jen, this feels more of a celebration of families past and present, and a way of connecting with the past.
We had a bit of a beer. We chatted about their family members, why they're there, finding the missing piece in their family's story and history. The lads, the young boys and men that went to the front, there was obviously a strong sense of camaraderie. And what was interesting was that sense of camaraderie was also echoed in the people that were attending the tour. It was lovely, actually.
Learning more about the lives of the men who served here during the First World War will be important for Jen as she creates her work for the Imperial War Museum. Soon she'll be on her way to the battlefield she'll be painting for the commission, Costarino Ridge in Macedonia.
Landscape Artist of the Year Jen Gash is travelling through northern Greece, following in the footsteps of the British troops from the Salonica campaign in the First World War. Tomorrow she will head to Costarino Ridge, the site of the work she's been commissioned to paint for the Imperial War Museum. But first, she's decided to make a bit of a detour in search of the famous artist who's come to inspire her journey.
I'm off to a small village in northern Greece, which used to be called Smol, but is called something else now. And Stanley Spencer used it in his painting of Travois that we saw at the Imperial War Museum. I remember when I was 15, 16, the first oil painting I ever did, my art teacher said it reminded him of a Stanley Spencer painting. And that stuck in my mind for years. And actually, when I look back at the painting, the tones and the shapes, I can now see what he meant.
Shortly after he landed in Salonica, Spencer was transferred to a small village just behind the front line, where the church was being used as a hospital. It was his first experience of battle, and he later spoke of the calmness and bravery of the wounded soldiers. This place was to become the inspiration for one of his most famous paintings. Having lost all his sketchbooks from Macedonia, Travois was painted entirely from memory. Jen's keen to see how Spencer transformed his experiences into the scene of his artwork.
So I'm wondering about how accurate the painting is in terms of a real-life representation. And I think, and I imagine that Spencer's decided to make the window bigger in service of the painting rather than say, it's exactly like this and I'm painting it exactly like this. And as a fellow artist, you know, we need sometimes to use the landscape or the items in the landscape differently to make the composition of the picture work better. Because this definitely, if he'd done the window the size it is in real life, he wouldn't have been able to do what he's done in Travois. It wouldn't have worked. And I think that's important when I'm making my landscape too. There might be some things enlarged, some things shrunk, some things slightly moved. And it's an important device to use.
Jen's come down to the shores of Lake Doiran, which was on the front line in the Salonica campaign, to work on the second of her preparatory studies for the final painting.
One of the things that I'm trying to capture by putting the mountain ridge in the reflection is this sort of daunting nature of what's out there. The darkness in the roots of the trees and the shapes that they make, it's all kind of gnarled. So I suppose the thing that fascinates me is the sort of darkness in beauty. The thing that I'm noticing and have noticed through the competition is my melancholic kind of way of sometimes painting things. It was interesting thinking about when Stanley was in the front and how he was storing up all this energy and all these ideas. And it's like that actually for me. It's kind of like it stores itself up and then it has to be done. Painting is so intrinsic to me now. I don't know what my identity would be if I didn't do it.
Art has always been a fundamental part of Jen's life. But a few years ago, her elder daughter was taken out of school suffering from depression, and Jen spent 2 years caring for her at home.
Trying to keep painting while Gilly was not well was really difficult. One, because I had so very little energy. I had so very little time. And if you disconnect from your work, you know, and you just only go to the studio maybe for 1 hour or 2 hours every couple of weeks, it's impossible really to get connected with work and help it flow. It just wasn't happening. You know, when I knew we had to give up the studio, and, you know, I kind of hadn't made anything or done anything that I was pleased with for a while, and you know, you're in, you know, financially you're in debt and things, and you're just thinking, what is the bloody point? And, you know, I remember packing all the stuff into the van again and thinking, oh, here we go again. What a pointless hobby. That's not a hobby, you know.
Jen's journey through the history of this remote region has taken her from Salonica on the coast up into the mountains on the Greece-Macedonia border. Now she's finally on her way to the landscape she'll be painting for her Imperial War Museum commission. The Battle of Costarino was fought in December 1915 between the Bulgarians and the 10th Irish Division of the British forces.
Jen's travelling up to the site of the battlefield with Alan Wakefield and some of the members of the Salonica Campaign Society.
So why am I in a tractor, Alan?
Why are you in a tractor? Well, it's the easiest way to get up here because you would have to walk otherwise. It's only it's only really 4x4s and tractors can get up here.
Okay.
So we're actually going up to the ridge line now.
Yeah.
So this is the back part of the ridge.
It is.
So this would have been the way they actually came up from up from Costarino.
The soldiers who fought in the Battle of Costarino faced huge obstacles with the rocky terrain and deep ravines. Road transportation was useless, and the soldiers travelled on foot, carrying their equipment and artillery on the backs of mules.
You've got to remember all the Irish guys, they would have had to walk up here. You've got mules to help you carry your kit, but apart from that, it's all walking. And the other thing is, of course, the weather's lovely today. It's lovely.
Yeah.
It was freezing cold, snow, ice, blizzard conditions when the Irish were up here.
This is the landscape Jen's travelled hundreds of miles to paint. The battlefield of Costarino.
This is a stunning view, Alan.
It is, it's fantastic. You can actually see the whole of the Costarino battlefield from this one point.
It's amazing. Tell me who was where?
Well, the Irish get here about the end of October,
Mm-hmm.
and really nothing happens for about a month. The weather gets increasingly worse.
Okay.
So the Irish are moving around on that ridge, the Bulgarians are moving around on their ridge, and nobody's really firing at each other.
Mm.
And on the 7th of December, there's thick fog everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So as you say, just the peak of this hill shows up,
Mm.
and then the Bulgarians attack, and they come round in the fog, they come round and surround this hill, and in 20 minutes, they're just all over this position.
When the Bulgarians pushed through the British line, the soldiers were forced into hand-to-hand combat.
The actual semblance of like formed units just breaks down, and it's literally, if you see another guy in a British uniform, you stick with him.
After 2 days of fighting, the British forces retreated, suffering devastating casualties.
They can't remove the dead.
Mm.
There's just no time. The Bulgarians have pushed through here so fast. So there's probably here 1 or 2 mass graves somewhere down behind that ridge line.
Gosh.
The bodies of the fallen soldiers have never been recovered, and this landscape has remained virtually untouched for 100 years.
I do feel a sense of responsibility for the men that fell here, because no one knows what happened here. If we think about this whole scape, maybe it's enough to just go, this landscape is a graveyard. So I'm becoming quite aware of the fact that I seem to have underpainted these canvases in blood red. And I did it as we were thinking about the death of all the soldiers. Feels like a bit of a cliche, really, but I certainly wasn't very conscious of that as I underpainted it. Blood was shed. I don't want to come here and stand at the top of a mountain and just go, right, that's what it looks like now. You know, this is a picture of this place now. It doesn't do justice to all the history of the place and the events. It's not the view that's in front of me I'm painting, it's the pasts of all the people, all the stuff that's gone on, and the kind of sort of feeling really about who I am as an artist and what I bring to that mix.
Jen's time in Macedonia is now coming to an end, and these canvases will be a starting point for her Imperial War Museum commission. But as she travels home, she'll also take with her the story of the lost soldiers of Costarino Ridge. It's 3 weeks since her trip to Macedonia, and back home in Bristol, Jen started work on her final painting for the Imperial War Museum. She has 1 month to complete the commission, but already there's a problem.
During the competition, Jen was painting in the family's living room, but the large-scale work she's got planned is going to need a much bigger space. Fortunately, a local farmer has come to the rescue.
We are actually in a cow shed. Thankfully, the cows aren't here yet. And it's lovely. I love the peace and quiet. It is quite evocative in terms of feelings and atmosphere. It feels quite organic and a bit mucky, which suits me down to the ground. So this is the farmer's trailer, which I've stuck some images and prep material on. These are images from the Imperial War Museum. This is the landscape as it was around the time of the battle. As you can see, there's a nice tent there with some soldiers in. And then the rest of the images here are sketches and ideas I've been playing with for the commission. This is the painting that I painted from Rocky Peak overlooking Costarino Ridge. There are clear things that I will be taking from this painting. One is hopefully the expanse of the hills in this region. It just stretches on for miles. So I'm hoping that somehow the vastness of this will come through in the main painting.
Jen's working hard on her commission, and in just 10 days' time, it will be unveiled at the Imperial War Museum in London. It may all be peace and quiet in the cowshed right now, but the clock is ticking.
Sometimes you have to kind of, even if there are elements that you like in what you've done, you have to kind of think, oh, I've actually got to get rid of that, or I've got to knock it back, or something. So this is one of those times, really. This rock was just a bit too busy. But I have been thinking about this and planning it for days. Don't get me wrong, it's quite nerve-wracking. Don't worry. I'm not as calm as I look. It's always quite difficult deciding on a finishing point. It's quite a large painting. I don't think it's gigantic, but some people might think it is. It might not go over someone's mantelpiece very easily. I decided that I wanted to work on a larger scale because there's something about the monumental nature of the events and what it's commemorating that felt really important to have some sort of statement in terms of the size. But especially if you see the paintings at the Imperial War Museum, they're all massive.
The Imperial War Museum want Jen to incorporate a sense of history as well as the present-day landscape. But bringing together the past and the present in a single painting is no easy task.
The main worries at the moment are this sort of lurching between feeling confident about the painting and then thinking everyone's going to hate it. I think in some ways the Imperial War Museum is the biggest opinion that I'm most concerned about, because it's standing alongside those great paintings and the giants who painted them. The competition, it has been life-changing. Forget the commission and forget the money and all of that. How I've engaged with the process, I've been really pleased with myself and how much I've learned about myself as a painter. How I talk to other people about what I am from now on has to have quite a big rethink. I always tag on the end, oh, and I'm a painter as well. And of course, people just assume you're a hobbyist. And I'm not. I want to own much more that I'm a painter and be okay with that. Been waiting 30 years, but about time. And yeah, it is about time.
After weeks of work, finally the day has come for Jen's commission to be unveiled at the Imperial War Museum in London.
An invited audience of curators, judges, friends and family are gathering to see the finished painting, on show in public for the very first time.
This is easily one of our great finalists because we've loved every single painting. It's very rare to find an artist who has got a different way of working, a different way of looking.
If Jen's got it right, this is the greatest moment that she could possibly have in her life so far. Here she's going to be in the halls of a national museum in this country.
I think we picked the one artist who is perfect for this commission.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we did brilliantly again.
Yeah.
It's lovely the girls are here, Jeff's here, and I think it's the first time that they've cottoned on to quite what's going on in terms of where the painting's going to be. I'm scared, I'm excited, nervous. It feels a bit surreal at the moment.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are here for a very special occasion, to unveil the Imperial War Museum's latest addition to its prestigious collection, a work created by Landscape Artist of the Year, Jen Gash.
We're going to hear from the person who commissioned this painting, the head of art at the Imperial War Museum here, Becky Newell.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to IWM. I'm so delighted to see so many people here. The museum has always been an active collector of contemporary art since its very beginning. Our hugely rich art collection is perhaps the most significant cornerstone of our museum. I can't overemphasize the very special nature of our ask to Jen. No artist 100 years ago reached the landscape which Jen has been considering. I'd like to extend particular thanks to Jen for attacking the brief with such gusto. Without further ado, I'd like to stop talking so that we can actually get on with this very important task of unveiling the work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Becky. And the moment has come. OK, here we go. Becky, what's your first one?
It's absolutely wonderful. It's everything I could have hoped for. It captures the landscape as we find it today. It's all there. Thank you so much.
No, it's a pleasure.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, Jen Gash.
Hello. Well done. It oozes that kind of warmth of the landscape, and I think we'll draw on so many narratives within our own art collection, as well as those historical stories.
What I found is the more I was standing there watching it, the more it drew me in. It's sort of otherworldly. It's an extraordinary piece of painting.
It's like a big open invitation into that landscape, but then you start thinking about the resonance of it and the history of it, and it becomes a very powerful painting.
It's romantic, it's poetic, and I think once it's in a really serious frame, I think it will stand really confidently alongside those male war artists that sit within this collection here at the Imperial War Museum.
I love the structure. I love the colour. I think she's very talented. I love it.
It doesn't feel real, it's so good. It's like unbelievably amazing. They are like clapping for my mum.
I'm really pleased with how people have reacted, actually. People have said that they get a real sensing of how it was out there, and I'm just so chuffed with that. I know now what I need to do next, because painting a picture that just looks nice on somebody's wall doesn't really do it for me. I want to paint pictures that have some sort of other purpose. So I do finally know now.